We've been as good as we can, struggled as hard as we could, helped others along the way when we did, to make this world just a better place for everybody. So who are we? How do we get there? Those are really important questions. And I think Canadians reflect that in a lot of the workshops. We have, well, who am I? And then when we ask that question, those who are born to privilege suddenly realize there's some disparity here and recognize that maybe that shouldn't be so. That equality really means mitigating disparity. Mitigating hate means you have to learn to love and be accepting of others. And I think it causes us to reflect deeply on what our values are as individuals and as a society. Who are we? And what will we do to change what we have at the moment that hasn't been perfect?
David, how do you answer that question?
Well, I'd take what Chief Joseph said as the first part of the answer. But the second question we ask is, who are they, in a sense of who are each other? In a sense, the question is for us to find out who each other are so we can understand what we have in common, but what we have in difference, and we can make room for that, and we can respect that, and we can join in that, and we can incorporate that into our society. And I think that's part of what Chief Joseph meant by who are we, but it's also not just the homogeneous we, it's the different we. And I think that's an important part of it.
And I think the follow-up question is, how do I engage? How do I become a part of this reconciliation movement?
Yeah, what are the steps?
The first step always is to really, really listen, right? Learn how to listen. Don't form your answer while I'm telling you. Listen to what I got to say. And then you read all that you can. You learn everything you can about the issues that face us. And then when we've done all of that, we find ways to engage with appropriate partners or sectors and begin to have a dialogue, real dialogue, different dialogue than anything we've had before. This morning, I had a call. I'm from the North Island, where they're having this dispute about the fish farms. Mm-hmm. One of the young fellows, who I love very much, phoned and said, how can this be real reconciliation when the DFO and the RCMP are going to move in because this Norwegian fish farm is going to restock the pens? And once they restock it, they're going to be there for another 20 years. How can we talk about reconciliation? And I said, you know what? We should have had this conversation a year ago or 2 years ago. We need a dialogue before the confrontation actually happens. If we're going to do away with it altogether, we ought to be getting together without positions in the first instance. Come into the room, hang our hats at the door, and just have a conversation about who are we. And it's not about how important we are or what jobs we have, but who are we as human beings. And then that's what we do in reconciliation. We bring people together and groups together. After that, and we tell you about what the process generally of reconciliation is, and then it's up to you to determine, wherever it is you live with your neighbors, to decide what kind of reconciliation processes you're going to engage in.
You facilitate a lot of those conversations, and I'm curious what you've learned.
Yeah, these conversations are so unheard of. Everybody goes to the positional conversation, the interest-based conversation first, and they never get to know how they got there or why they shouldn't be there, or vice versa with others. And they never get to understand you as a human being or I as a human being, that indeed, if we had talked together in the first instance, we do have a lot of similarities that pull us together to seek a deeper resolution to some of the issues that divide us.
What's the question that I should have asked you both?
When I look at reconciliation, I see all of the people who are impatient. They think that reconciliation is something you can slice up and put together by number. Well, reconciliation is hard and it's tough and it's challenging. And it has a multiplicity of dimensions and definitions. And all of those are not wrong, but they're all issues that we need to deal with, that begin to strip away those things that cause harm or hurt to others or cause division. And we need to begin to strip them away little by little by little by little until we actually see each other and we begin to respect each other, I think. And some of the other things, and I think David could talk to that more than I could, are big stroke, like rights and title, Aboriginal rights and title. Those will need to be done, and one day they will. I don't know to what extent, but they will be. All of the 94 calls to action by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission are done slowly right now, some of them, and there are others that are going to take longer. And all of those contribute to reconciliation. And what I'm saying is that reconciliation is necessary because we live in imperfection, so to speak. And it'll always be so. That's the way human beings are made. And just when we climb the hill and we put the flag up and say we're reconciled, we're going to discover there's still things to work on. So we will know, each of us in our own time, as individuals and as collectives, when we've achieved measures that are substantial to make us see each other differently or feel differently about ourselves. But there's no magic moment when we can plant the flag on a hill and say we've done it, we've done her. We just keep working on it. Dr. Martin Luther King's daughter last year came to the last walk. She said every generation has to struggle for its own freedom. And I think for us, all human beings, that's true. All of us will have to struggle for our own freedom.
One way we can tell that there's work to do on reconciliation is simply by looking at objective data. I mean, Chief Joseph talked about the big stroke items and so on, but when we see that there is a disparity in terms of education, in terms of incarceration, in terms of healthcare, in terms of employment, in terms of virtually every measure you can look at between one group in society and another, we can say that we have work to do. And today and for a long time, it's been Aboriginal people at the bottom of the heap. But resolving that issue, if we find we've pushed somebody else to the bottom of the heap, will indicate that we've still got work to do. There will probably always be work to do, but there is a check where we can look at it and say, hold it here. Do we have an identifiable problem? Is there something out there that needs a solution?
And how can we help?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is by paying attention to it and caring about it. People who care about it, and quite frankly, this country has been engaged in a conversation over the last decade, which is extremely important and has been life-changing for the country, I think, in terms of opening people's eyes and saying, look, we've got some things to deal with. We don't measure up to our own stated standards. And I think that people, when they see that, have a desire to change it. I mean, basically, people are good. Basically, people want to have a just and fair society. And the biggest difficulty for a long time was that our injustices were invisible. Now they're becoming visible and people want to do something about it.
I want to thank you both for taking the time to come and see us. I am honored. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you for having us on. Thank you.
We've been speaking with Chief Robert Joseph, Ambassador of Reconciliation Canada, who has dedicated his life to bridging differences between cultures. We've also been speaking with David Patterson, a member of Reconciliation Canada's Board of Directors, who has been crucial in bringing legal understanding as well as justice to the reconciliation process. That's another edition of the Conversation Lab. This radio program and podcast is produced by CFRO-FM in Vancouver's downtown east side. We're on the territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Our gratitude and thanks to them, as well as to the many not-for-profit organizations, community groups, and change makers around the world that support this program. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please consider becoming a member of Co-op Radio to support this program and the many others produced by hundreds of volunteers. If you have a story to share or know someone who does, please have them contact us at coopradio.org, theconversationlab.ca, and on many social media and podcasting platforms. This episode was cobbled together with some help from Brian McKinnon, Kimit Sekon, John Massacre, and Julian Anton. Thanks, guys, and thank you for listening. I'm Don Schaefer.